The Korean Mafia boss returned from abroad and found his children begging on the street. Stop the car. You know that moment when your brain refuses what your eyes are showing you? When reality breaks and you're sure, absolutely sure, you must be dreaming. That's where Lee Hae found himself when his SUV rolled past a busy Seoul intersection, and he saw them. Two boys, barefoot, selling oranges from a battered tray. His driver was already asking what was wrong, but Lee Hae couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, because those faces staring up at passing strangers? They belonged to his sons. They said the summer had been unforgiving that year. Even the concrete seemed to sweat. Jaemin stood beneath the towering glass buildings of Gangnam, the sun pressing down on his small shoulders like a hand trying to crush him. His shirt, donated, faded, too large, hung off his thin frame. Sweat ran down his temple as he lifted the tray higher, oranges rolling dangerously close to the edge. Please, he whispered to passing strangers. Just one. Most walked past. Some pretended not to see. A few tossed coins without slowing, without stopping, without seeing. Beside him, his younger brother Jae-won clutched the edge of the tray like it might fall, and take him with it. They had learned not to cry. Crying wasted strength. Their aunt had taught them that. When Jae-won's knees buckled, the oranges scattered across the road, rolling between tires and designer shoes. People shouted. Cars honked. But no one stopped. Except one man. Ade, the roadside food vendor, dropped his spatula and rushed toward them. He lifted Jae-won gently, dusting his face with trembling, calloused hands. Ah, this child, he breathed. When last did you eat? Jaemin ran up, panting, eyes wide with panic. Uncle, please, please don't tell Auntie. She'll. His voice died. Ade looked at the thin boy and the fainted child, and felt something dark rise in his chest. Who is your auntie? He asked, though he already knew the answer. Seo-yeon, Jaemin whispered. Our mother's sister. That name froze Ade for a heartbeat. He'd heard stories. He'd seen her in the market, designer bags, fresh manicures, shouting orders at these two boys while her own daughter never lacked for anything. He'd watched them sell fruits barefoot while she opened a second boutique. He tore a piece of bread and pressed it into Jaemin's hand. Eat. Give your brother some when he wakes. Don't tell her I helped. He paused, his jaw tight. But listen, my boy. Your father must know.
I have to tell you something.
Jaemin's eyes filled with something
I'm so
Ade
sorry.
couldn't name. Hope or maybe terror. He's abroad, the boy said quietly. He doesn't know. Ade pulled out his phone, took a photo. Just one. Two boys. Oranges. Sunburned, hollow faces. Then it's time he found out. And that is how the truth finally began to travel. 8 years earlier, Lee Hae had stood at Incheon Airport holding his sons for the last time before boarding a private jet bound for Eastern Europe. But that story would come later. For now, there were only the boys. And the heat. And the endless, grinding present. Jaemin woke at 5 a.m. every morning to the sound of his aunt's fist on the door. Up. Now. The market won't wait for lazy children. He would shake Jae-won awake gently, always gently, because his brother startled easily now. They would dress in the dark, pulling on the same clothes from yesterday, the day before, the week before. The shirts were donated. The shorts had someone else's name written in faded marker on the waistband. Breakfast didn't exist. Breakfast is for children who earn it, Seo-yeon would say, lighting a cigarette in the doorway while her daughter Haun ate honey toast at the table behind her. The rule was simple. No food until the tray is empty. Some days, the tray was never empty. By 6 a.m., they were on the street corner in Gangnam, standing beneath luxury billboards advertising watches that cost more than most people earned in a year. Women in yoga pants walked past with iced Americanos. Businessmen in pressed suits checked their phones. And two boys stood barefoot on hot pavement, holding oranges no one wanted. Please, sir. Fresh oranges. Miss, only 2001. Please. The word became a reflex. A breath. A heartbeat. Jaemin had learned to smile even when his stomach cramped. He'd learned to stand straighter when people looked at him with pity, because pity sometimes bought an orange, and an orange meant they were one step closer to eating. Jae-won had learned something different. He'd learned to disappear, to make himself small, to stop asking questions, to hold the tray without trembling, even when his arms burned and his vision blurred from standing too long in the sun. At 7 years old, he'd learned that hunger wasn't something you complained about. It was just the way things were. Young, he whispered one afternoon, tugging on Jaemin's sleeve. My stomach hurts. I know. Jaemin's voice was soft, steady, the voice of someone far older than 10. Just a little longer. We only have 5 oranges left. By sunset, They had sold 3. The walk home was always the worst part. Jaemin counted the streetlights. Jae-won counted his steps. Neither of them spoke about what waited at the end. Seo-yeon was standing in the doorway when they arrived, arms crossed, ice cold. 2 left. Her voice was flat. Dangerous. Yes, auntie. Jaemin kept his head down. Do you think food is free? She stepped closer. Do you think I feed useless children out of kindness? No, auntie. Then why? She hissed, grabbing the tray and hurling it against the wall. Are there still oranges in this tray? The fruit rolled across the floor. Haeun, watching from the couch with a bowl of ice cream, didn't even flinch. Jae-won's lip trembled. Jaemin squeezed his hand. Don't cry. Don't cry. Don't. No dinner, Seo-yeon said simply. Maybe tomorrow you'll work harder. She slammed the door to their room. In the darkness, Jaemin pulled his brother close. It's okay, he whispered, even though it wasn't. Appa will come back. He promised. Jae-won said nothing. He'd stopped believing in promises. Outside, the city glittered. Neon signs. Luxury cars. Laughter spilling from restaurants. Inside, 2 boys curled together on a thin mattress, stomachs empty, hope fading. And somewhere far away, their father sent another wire transfer. Money that would never reach them. Money that bought their aunt a 3rd boutique. While they learned to sleep through hunger. Tomorrow, the tray would be waiting. And so would she. 8 years earlier, the air inside Incheon Airport smelled like coffee and goodbye. Lee Hae knelt on the polished floor, eye level with his sons, his hands resting on their small shoulders. Jaemin was only 2. Jae-won barely walking. They didn't understand what abroad meant. They didn't understand that this moment would stretch into years. Appa has to go away for a while, he said softly, brushing Jaemin's hair back from his forehead. But I'll call you every week. I'll send presents. And when it's safe, I'll come back for you. When? Jaemin asked, his voice small. Leha esterhota ittened. Soon. It was a lie, but it was the kindest one he had. Behind him, his men waited by the private terminal, stone-faced, armed, patient. The kind of men who made problems disappear. The kind of men who couldn't protect children from the life Lee Hae had built. Eastern Europe was a war zone. Rival families. Old grudges. New enemies who saw weakness in anything soft, anything loved. He'd made too many enemies to count. And his sons had already lost their mother. He wouldn't let them lose their lives. You'll stay with Aunt Seo-yeon, Lee Hae said, glancing up at the woman standing beside them. His late wife's younger sister. Family. Blood. She'll keep you safe until I come back. Seo-yeon smiled sweetly, resting a hand on Jae-won's head. Her nails were painted red. Her perfume was expensive. I'll raise them like my own appa, she said, voice warm with sincerity. You have my word. They'll want for nothing. Lee Hae believed her. Why wouldn't he? She was family. She'd wept at his wife's funeral. She'd offered to take the boys without hesitation, refusing payment at first, until he insisted. I'll send money every month, he said firmly. For school. For food. For whatever they need. He paused. If anything happens to me, there's a trust. They'll be taken care of. Nothing will happen to you, Seo-yeon said. And nothing will happen to them. I promise. The boarding announcement echoed through the terminal. Lee Hae pulled his sons into one last embrace, breathing in the scent of their hair, memorizing the weight of them in his arms. Be good, he whispered. Appa loves you. Then he stood, nodded to Seo-yeon, and walked toward the gate. He didn't look back. If he had, he might have seen the way her smile vanished the moment he turned away. For the first year, everything seemed fine. Lee Hae called every Sunday. The boys appeared on screen, clean, fed, smiling. Seo-yeon would hold the phone, coaching from off-camera. Tell Appa about school. Show him your new toy. Smile properly. And they did. Because they were young. Because they trusted her. Every month, Lee Hae transferred money. Large amounts. 5 million Korean wons. 7 million Korean wons. Enough for private schools, tutors, medical care, comfort. Enough for a good life. He sent gifts too. Remote control cars. Clothes. Books. Voice notes filled with stories and promises. Appa is working hard so you can have everything. Be patient. I'll come home soon. From Prague, from Moscow, from cities whose names the boys couldn't pronounce, Lee Hae watched his empire grow. He negotiated deals worth millions. He eliminated threats. He built power that made men tremble. And he believed, truly believed, that distance was protection. That money could substitute for presence. That trust, once given to family, was sacred. In Seoul, Seo-yeon opened her first boutique 6 months after he left. She named it Grace in Gold. The sign was expensive, the inventory imported. And when people asked where she got the capital, she smiled that same sweet smile. Family, she said simply. Family takes care of family. On the screen during video calls, the boys grew taller. Or so it seemed. Lee-hae couldn't see what the camera didn't show. The thinning faces, the fear in their eyes, the way they flinched when Seo-yeon moved too quickly. He couldn't hear what happened after the calls ended. You want him to stop sending money? She would hiss. Then keep smiling. Power had taught Lee-hae many things. But it hadn't taught him this. The most dangerous betrayals don't come from enemies. They come from the people you trust to love what you love. And by the time he learned that lesson, 8 years had already been stolen. At first, it was small things. A delayed enrollment. The school year just started. We'll register them next term. Meals that grew smaller. Children shouldn't eat too much. It makes them lazy. Bedtimes that came earlier. They need discipline. Lee-hae sent 7 million Korean wons in the second month. Seo-yeon bought new furniture. By the third month, the mask was slipping. Stop crying, she snapped when Jae-won asked for his mother. She's dead. Crying won't bring her back. The sweetness in her voice, the warmth she'd shown at the airport, evaporated like steam. What remained was something colder, sharper. She would stand in front of the mirror, trying on clothes her sister would never wear, and feel the old wound open fresh. Clara got the life, the husband, the money, the escape. And what did I get? The answer stared back at her from the faces of 2 small boys who looked too much like their father. Nothing. The video calls became performances. Come here. Stand still. Smile. Seo-yeon would prop the phone up, position the boys in front of the window where the light was good, and hiss instructions from just out of frame. Tell him you're happy. Show him you're drawing. Don't you dare cry. Jaemin learned to smile on command. Jae-won learned to stay silent. And when Lee-hae's face filled the screen, tired older speaking from some cold European city, they would recite their lines perfectly. We miss you, Appa. Auntie is taking good care of us. We love you. The moment the call ended, Seo-yeon's smile would vanish. Good. Maybe this month he'll send more. By the 6th month, the boys stopped asking about school. School is expensive, Seo-yeon said flatly. You want to eat? Then earn it. She handed Jaemin a dented metal tray piled with oranges. Stand at the Gangnam intersection. Sell these. Don't come back until they're gone. Jaemin was 3 years old. He didn't know how to count change. Didn't know how to negotiate. Didn't know that children his age were supposed to be learning alphabet songs and making friends. He only knew that his stomach hurt, and that his aunt's anger hurt worse. But Auntie, he whispered, I don't know how. Her hand moved faster than his fear. The slap echoed. Then learn. The money kept coming. 6 million Korean wons. 8 million Korean wons. 10 million Korean wons on Jaemin's 4th birthday. Seo-yeon opened a second boutique. She moved into a bigger apartment, 3 bedrooms, marble countertops, a view of the Han River. Her daughter Haun never went without. New clothes each season. Taekwondo lessons. A private tutor for English. While Jaemin and Jae-won shared a room the size of a closet, sleeping on a single mattress with no frame, wearing shirts that hadn't been washed in weeks. Why does Haun get new shoes? Jae-won asked once. Only once. Seo-yeon's eyes went dead. Because Haun is mine. You are borrowers. And borrowers don't get to ask questions. She locked them in their room for 2 days. No food. No water. No light. When she finally opened the door, Jaemin's lips were cracked and bleeding. Have you learned? She asked. He nodded. He had. By the 2nd year, the routine was carved into their bones. Wake at 5 a.m. dress in silence. Take the tray. Walk to the corner. Sell. Smile at strangers. Beg when necessary. Count coins with shaking hands. Return only when the tray was empty, or when the sun set, and they had no choice. No food until it's sold, Seo-yeon would say, barely looking up from her phone. Some nights, Jaemin sold everything. Some nights he didn't. On those nights, Haun ate fried chicken at the table while the boys listened from their room. Stomachs growling, mouths watering. If you tell your father, Seo-yeon said once, her voice calm, almost gentle, the money stops. And if the money stops, I send you to an orphanage. Do you understand? Jaemin nodded. Say it. I understand, Auntie. Good boy. She patted his head like he was a dog. The lie had learned to breathe. It grew with every transfer. Every boutique. Every video call where the boys smiled and lied and performed their lines. And somewhere in Eastern Europe, Lee Hae looked at his phone and thought, at least they're safe. At least they have family. At least I did the right thing. He didn't know that the right thing, given to the wrong person, becomes the sharpest blade. And it was already cutting deep. Ade had been selling tteokbokki and fried squid from his roadside cart for 14 years. He knew the rhythm of Gangnam. The businessmen who ordered without looking up. The students who counted coins twice before buying. The tourists who took photos and left without purchasing anything. And he knew when something was wrong. The boys appeared on a Tuesday morning in late spring. Too small. Too thin. Too quiet. Jaemin couldn't have been more than 4 years old, but he stood like someone much older, shoulders back, eyes forward, holding that dented tray like his life depended on it. Because it did. Ade watched them from his cart across the street. Watched the way Jaemin would approach strangers with a rehearsed smile. Watched the way Jaewon stood frozen, clutching the edge of the tray, flinching whenever someone walked too close. Most vendors didn't notice. But Ade had children of his own. He knew what fear looked like. The first time he spoke to them, Jaemin nearly dropped the oranges. Hey boys. Ade kept his voice soft. You hungry? Jaemin's eyes widened. He shook his head quickly. Too quickly. We're fine, sir. Thank you. The words were polite. Practiced. Wrong. No child standing barefoot in the heat for 6 hours was fine. Ade didn't push. Not that day. But he started watching more carefully. They came every day. Same corner. Same tray. Same hollow eyes. Some days they sold well. Most days they didn't. Ade began to notice patterns. When the tray was still half full by evening, Jaemin's hands would shake. When strangers ignored them, Jaewon would go completely still, like he was trying to disappear. And when the sun set and they finally left, they never looked relieved. They looked terrified. One afternoon, when the heat was particularly brutal, Ade crossed the street with 2 cups of water. Here, he said simply. Jaemin hesitated. We don't have money. I'm thin, burned, exhausted, and unmistakably his. The message below the photo was short. Sir, are these your sons? Lee Hae's hands began to shake. The call came at 3 a.m. Seoul time. Seo Yun was asleep when her phone lit up with Lee Hae's name. She sat up slowly, heart already calculating. Composed herself. Let it ring 3 times before answering. Appa. Her voice was soft, confused, perfectly calibrated. Is everything okay? I received a photo today. Silence. Then a photo. Of my sons. His voice was flat. Controlled. The kind of control that preceded violence. Selling oranges on the street. Barefoot. Looking like they haven't eaten in weeks. Seo Yun laughed. It was a masterful performance. Surprised, wounded, offended all at once. What? Appa, that's ridiculous. The boys are fine. They're sleeping right now. Someone is trying to cause trouble. You know how people are. Jealous. They see that I'm doing well and they... Show me. What? Wake them up. Show me. Right now. She didn't miss a beat. Appa, it's 3 in the morning. They have school tomorrow. I'm not going to traumatize them by dragging them out of bed because some jealous person sent you a fake photo. Her voice sharpened, just slightly. You think I would let anything happen to my sister's children? You think I don't love them like my own? The guilt was a weapon. She wielded it expertly. Lee Hae was silent. She pressed forward. I know you're under stress. I know your work is dangerous and you worry. But Appa, please don't insult me like this. Haven't I sacrificed everything to raise them? Haven't I? Send me a photo. Now. Of them sleeping. Now Seo Yun. She ended the call. 30 seconds later, a photo arrived. 2 boys. Clean pajamas. Peaceful faces. Sleeping. It was 3 months old. Lee Hae stared at it. Everything looked right. The room. The lighting. Their faces. But something in his chest refused to settle. He'd built an empire on instinct. On knowing when someone was lying, when danger was close, when the obvious answer was the wrong one. And every instinct he had was screaming. He called back. Seo Yun didn't answer. He called again. The 3rd time, she picked up, her voice ice. What more do you want from me? I send you updates. I care for them. I love them. And this is how you repay me? With accusations. I'm coming back. The words dropped like a blade. Silence. When? Her voice was very careful now. I'll let you know. He hung up. Lee Hae didn't let her know. He booked a flight that same hour. Private. Untraceable. Told no one except his driver, Woo Jin. who would meet him at Incheon. 18 hours of travel. 18 hours of his mind cycling between doubt and rage. Maybe she's right. Maybe someone is trying to cause problems. Maybe I'm overreacting. But then he'd look at the photo again, the one Ade had sent, and see things he couldn't unsee. The thinness of their faces. The deadness in their eyes. The way Jaemin's hand gripped Jaewon's shoulder, protective, desperate, afraid. Children didn't look like that when they were safe. He landed at dawn. Woo Jin was waiting with the black SUV, eyes knowing but silent. Where to, Chairman? Lee Hae pulled up the address. Seo Yun's apartment, the one he'd paid for. The one that was supposed to be a home for his children. Gangnam. Quickly. The car merged into Seoul traffic. Lee Hae's jaw was set. His hands were steady. He'd rehearsed the confrontation 100 times on the flight. He would walk in calmly, demand to see the boys, assess the situation himself. If everything was fine, he would apologize. If it wasn't, his phone buzzed. Another message from the unknown number. A video this time. He pressed play. Jaemin and Jaewon, standing on a street corner. Real time. This morning. The timestamp was 30 minutes ago. Same tray. Same oranges. Same hollow eyes. Lee Hae's blood turned to ice. Woo Jin. Sir. Change of plans. Head to Gangnam intersection. Near the. He didn't finish. Because the SUV had just turned onto the boulevard. And there, on the median strip between rushing lanes, beneath the morning sun that was already too hot, two small figures. Barefoot. Holding a tray. Lee Hae's world stopped. Stop the car. The words tore from his throat like a command, sharp enough to cut through traffic noise. The SUV screeched to a halt. Horns exploded behind them. But Lee Hae was already moving. Fate hadn't waited for him to reach the house. It had put the truth directly in his path. And there was no more room for doubt. The door of the SUV opened. For a moment, the world was just noise, horns, engines, shouts from irritated drivers trapped behind the stopped vehicle. Then Lee Hae stepped onto the pavement. And everything went silent. Not literally. The city kept moving. Traffic kept flowing around them. But in the space between him and those two small figures on the median strip, sound ceased to exist. He walked slowly, like a man approaching a dream he was afraid to wake from. Like a man who knew that one wrong move would shatter everything. 20 steps became 10. 10 became 5. The boys didn't notice at first. Jaemin was focused on the tray, repositioning oranges that had started to roll. Jaewon stood beside him, staring at nothing, his face blank with exhaustion. Then Jaemin looked up. His eyes, those eyes that had learned not to hope, not to expect, not to want, went wide. The orange in his hand slipped. It hit the pavement and rolled into traffic. Neither of them moved to catch it. Appa? The word was barely a whisper. A question. A prayer. Like he didn't trust his own eyes. Like he'd imagined this moment so many times that reality couldn't possibly be real. Lee Hae's throat closed. He dropped to his knees on the asphalt, right there in the middle of the intersection, in front of hundreds of witnesses. In his expensive suit that was already collecting dust. None of it mattered. Jaemin, he breathed. Jaewon. Time shattered. Jaemin moved first, stumbling forward, the tray clattering to the ground, oranges scattering everywhere. He crashed into his father's chest with a sob that sounded like it had been trapped for 8 years. Lee Hae caught him, pulled him close, reached for Jaewon, who stood frozen, trembling, like he'd forgotten how to move. Come here, Lee Hae whispered, his voice breaking. It's okay. Come here. Jaewon took one step, then another. Then he broke. Lee Hae pulled both boys into his arms, and the sound that came out of him wasn't dignified or controlled, or anything resembling the man who ruled empires and commanded fear. It was raw, shattered, human. He was shaking. His hands moved over them frantically, checking, searching, cataloging every wrong thing. Jaemin's ribs were too visible, sharp ridges under thin skin. Jaewon's arms were covered in bruises, old ones yellow and fading, and newer ones still purple. Their hair was matted. Their clothes reeked. Their feet were cracked and bleeding from walking barefoot on hot pavement. Lee Hae lifted Jaewon's sleeve. A scar ran across his forearm, deliberate, precise, the kind left by something sharp. His vision went red, then white, then nothing but the faces of his sons, staring up at him like he was a miracle they'd stopped believing in. What did she do to you? His voice cracked completely. What did she? He couldn't finish. Jaemin was crying now too, silent, shaking sobs that racked his small frame. We thought you forgot us, he whispered. We thought. Never. Lee Hae cupped his face with both hands. Never, never, never. I'm here. I'm here now. I'm so sorry. I'm. Around them, the world had stopped pretending not to watch. Phones were out. Videos recording. A crowd was forming on the sidewalk. Someone whispered, "Is that Lee Hae?" Someone else. "The chairman? He's crying. Those kids. Oh my God, look at them." Woo Jin appeared at Lee Hae's side, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "Chairman," he said quietly. "We should get the car closer," Lee Hae said without looking up. His voice was steel now. Cold. Focused. "Call Dr. Kong. Tell him to meet us at the house immediately. And call Attorney Shin." "Yes, sir." Lee Hae stood, lifting Jae-won into his arms. The boy weighed almost nothing. Jaemin clung to his leg, unwilling to let go even for a second. "We're going home," Lee Hae said softly. "Both of you. You're never going back to her. Do you understand?" Jaemin's eyes went wide with fear. "But Auntie said." "I don't care what she said." Lee Hae's voice was gentle, but underneath it was something dark and final. "She can't hurt you anymore. I promise." The crowd parted as he walked toward the SUV. Cameras followed. By sunset, the footage would be everywhere. The Mafia boss who ruled Seoul's underworld, kneeling on the street, crying openly, holding two broken children like they were the only thing in the world that mattered. Because they were. And now, everyone would know what had been done to them, including Seo-yeon, who had no idea what was coming. The apartment building was in one of Seoul's wealthiest districts. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Marble lobby. A doorman who straightened nervously when Lee Hae walked past without acknowledging him. Woo Jin followed 3 steps behind, carrying Jae-won. Jaemin refused to let go of his father's hand. The elevator ride to the 14th floor was silent. Lee Hae's jaw was set. His eyes were focused straight ahead. But his hand, still holding Jaemin's, was shaking. The door wasn't locked. Lee Hae pushed it open. Inside, the apartment was exactly what his money had bought. Spacious, modern, expensive. Leather couches. A large TV playing a drama. The smell of fresh-cooked galbi wafting from the kitchen. Seo-yeon was sitting at the dining table with Ha-eun, both of them eating lunch. Grilled meat. Rice. Soup. Kimchi. Fruit. She looked up when the door opened. The chopsticks fell from her hand. Her face went white. "Appa." Lee Hae stepped inside. Behind him, Woo Jin set Jae-won down gently but stayed close, blocking the exit. Seo-yeon stood slowly, her chair scraping against the floor. I didn't know you were coming, the boys they. Sit down." His voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. Seo-yeon sat. Ha-eun looked between them, confused, a piece of meat still in her hand. Lee Hae walked further into the apartment, his eyes cataloging everything. The new furniture. The designer handbag on the counter. The expensive shoes by the door. Then he turned to look at the hallway. "Show me their room." "Appa, listen." "Show me their room." Seo-yeon's mouth opened. Closed. She looked trapped. Jaemin's hand tightened around his father's. It's the last door," he whispered. Lee Hae walked down the hall. The master bedroom. Spacious, bright, king-sized bed. Ha-eun's room. Decorated, colorful, filled with toys. The last door was barely a door at all, more like a closet that had been repurposed. He opened it. The room was 3 meters by 2 meters. One thin mattress on the floor. No seats. No pillows. A single light bulb hanging from the ceiling. The window was painted shut. It smelled like mildew and fear. Lee Hae stood there for a long moment. Then he turned around and walked back to the dining room. Seo-yeon was standing now, words tumbling out desperately. "They're difficult children, they don't listen. I did my best. You don't know how hard it's been." "Explain," Lee Hae said quietly. He pulled out a chair and sat down across from her. That calm, that terrible deadly calm, filled the room like poison gas. "Explain why my sons were selling oranges on the street while your daughter ate galbi." They wanted to help, they. "Explain why Jae-won has scars on his arms." Seo-yeon's face crumbled. I would never." Lee Hae lifted Jae-won's sleeve. The scar was visible even from across the room. "Explain why they haven't been to school in 6 years." Silence. "Explain why they sleep in a closet while you live in luxury bought with money I sent for them." "Appa, please. Explain why my son weighs less now than he did when I left 8 years ago." Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. Neighbors had started gathering in the doorway, drawn by the voices, by the tension, by the presence of Lee Hae himself. Someone was recording. Lee Hae stood slowly. He looked around the apartment, at the expensive furnishings, the full kitchen, the comfortable life built on lies. This house, he said quietly, his voice carrying to every witness, was built with their blood. He turned to Seo-yeon. You took money meant for children and bought yourself a kingdom. You starved my sons so your daughter could feast. You beat them. You locked them away. You made them beg on the street while you opened boutiques. Seo-yeon fell to her knees. Please, Appa, I'm sorry, I'll do better, You're done. 2 words. Final a grave closing. Woojin. Yes, Chairman. Call the police. I want her arrested before sunset. Call Attorney Shin. I want every bank record, every transfer, every receipt. And call Child Protective Services. I want doctors here within the hour to document everything. Yes, sir. Seo-yeon was sobbing now, hands clasped together begging. Please, I'm family, your wife's sister. You can't. Lee-hae looked down at her without an ounce of mercy. My wife would spit on you. He turned to his sons. Get anything you want from that room. We're leaving. Jaemin looked up at him, eyes wide. We're really not coming back? Never. They left with nothing. Because there was nothing in that apartment worth taking. Except the boys themselves. Behind them, Seo-yeon's screams echoed through the hallway. But Lee-hae didn't look back. Some betrayals didn't deserve discussion. They only deserved justice. And justice was already on its way. The courtroom was silent when the verdict was read. Seo-yeon Park, you have been found guilty of child abuse, fraud, and embezzlement. This court sentences you to 8 years imprisonment and orders full restitution of all funds misappropriated from the victims. The judge's gavel fell. Seo-yeon crumpled in her seat, her lawyer's hand on her shoulder doing nothing to steady her. Lee-hae sat in the back row motionless. He didn't smile, didn't react, just watched as the woman who'd promised to raise his sons like her own was led away in handcuffs. Justice had been swift. The evidence was overwhelming. Bank records showed 847 million Korean wons transferred over 8 years. Money meant for school fees, medical care, food, clothes. Money that had built boutiques, bought properties, funded a lifestyle of comfort while 2 children starved. Ade had testified. His voice steady, his words damning. I watched those boys grow thinner every day. I watched them beg. I watched them collapse from hunger while she drove past in a car bought with their father's money. Neighbors testified. Teachers from the school the boys had never attended testified. Even the doorman from her building testified. About the times he'd seen the children sent out at dawn. About the times they'd returned after dark, trembling with exhaustion. The doctors testified last. Malnutrition. Stunted growth. Evidence of repeated physical trauma. Scars consistent with intentional harm. Jaemin had sat through all of it, holding his father's hand, his face carefully blank. Jae-won hadn't come to court at all. He was still too afraid. When it was over, Lee-hae stood and walked out without looking back. Some victories didn't feel like winning. They just felt like ending something that should never have begun. 3 weeks later, the house was different now. Not the apartment. Lee-hae had bought a proper home, quiet, secure, with a garden and rooms that actually had windows. Jaemin and Jae-won were eating breakfast when he came downstairs. Real breakfast. Eggs, toast, fruit, milk. Jae-won was still learning to eat without fear, still glancing up occasionally, as if waiting for someone to take the plate away. But Jaemin smiled now. Small smiles. Careful ones. But real. Good morning, Appa, he said softly. Good morning. Lee-hae poured himself coffee and sat down, watching them eat. This was what he'd wanted 8 years ago. Safety. Peace. Normalcy. But nothing about this was normal. Because at the edge of the room, sitting quietly on the couch with her hands folded in her lap, was Haeun, Seo-yeon's daughter. She was 9 years old. She hadn't asked to be born to a monster. Hadn't asked for any of this. When her mother was arrested, she'd been placed in temporary state care. But Lee-hae had intervened. He didn't know why. Maybe because she looked lost. Maybe because punishing a child for her mother's sins felt wrong. Maybe because some part of him still remembered his wife's voice. Family is family, even when they fail us. But looking at her now, quiet, afraid, innocent, he felt something twist in his chest. She had everything while his sons had nothing. She ate while they starved. She slept in comfort while they slept in a closet. And she'd never questioned it. Never helped. Never told. Did that make her guilty? Or just a child? Haeun looked up and caught his eyes. She flinched. Then quietly, I'm sorry. 2 words. Small. Fragile. Jaemin stopped eating, watching. The silence stretched. Lee-hae stood and walked to the window. staring out at the garden where J1 was supposed to be playing, but was still too afraid to go outside alone. His hands gripped the windowsill. Blood had betrayed blood, but children had suffered for it. And now he stood at a crossroads he'd never wanted to face. He turned slowly, looking directly ahead, not at Haun, not at his sons, but at something beyond them. At you. If you were me, he said, his voice steady but weighted with something impossible, what would you do? The question hung in the air. Would you raise the child of the woman who destroyed your family? His eyes were dark, unreadable. Or let her carry her mother's sins? The screen faded. The question remained. And there was no easy answer. There never is. Before you go, if this story touched you even a little, don't leave without subscribing. It really helps this channel grow. Thank you.